You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Hi everyone. So for those who don't know, I'm Tyler. I'm the Sustainability and Compliance Manager here. My name is Tyler Bound. I'm pretty new to the town. Kind of started on a big project that everyone's involved in now, which is trash and recycling. So I just wanted to say thank you to those who are attending and thank you to those watching at home. Tonight we have a very great presentation. I've seen parts of this presentation before and it's very knowledgeable and you will learn a lot about recycling. We have Cheryl Baldwin here from Connecticut Deep. So I'm going to pass it over to Cheryl and we'll learn some stuff about recycling.
Great, thanks Tyler. And I'm going to just say ditto for thanking for coming out tonight since it's a very strange night. I can't tell if it's lovely or wet and rainy. And thanks of course for folks that are at home as well. So I am from the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. I work in the Sustainable Materials Management Group. And tonight I'm here to talk about materials management, recycling specifically, but I want to give you some context. So when we think about solid waste, I know you're probably familiar with the 3 R's, but we actually look at it in terms of a hierarchy, that we need to focus first on waste prevention and reuse, and then we think about recycling and composting, and then at the very end, whatever's left we think about for disposal. And if you're not aware, last year in July of 2022, the MIRA facility in Hartford, which is a waste-to-energy facility that burns trash, or used to, closed. And as a result of that closure, now about 1/3 of our materials are going out of state. They tend to be going to landfills, so they're no longer incinerated or creating energy. Instead, they're going to landfills mostly in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. But we don't think this is a good plan. What it does is it helps create an incentive for us to do better, that we need to recycle more, compost more, and perhaps practice more waste prevention. Now, before MIRA closed, during the pandemic actually, when we knew that MIRA was closing, Commissioner Dykes of the Deep and a number of local municipal officials from Connecticut towns formed the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management. And together they said, okay, MIRA is closing. This is the closing of MIRA and the waste-to-energy facility is probably going to make our trash expenses go up. What can we do to try to prevent that from happening? And what they ended up doing is creating a number of working groups and focused on creating some solutions. And they created a menu of options, which is on our webpage. And from that menu of options, it lists things that rural communities can do, urban communities, and suburban communities. Not everybody can do everything, but there's probably something in there that every community can do to figure out how to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Now, the priorities that were set forth clearly is reduce, reuse, and recycle. It's also about reducing contamination, which is why I'm here tonight, to help you better understand what goes in the bin and what does not go in the bin. And then also to try to figure out how can we increase food scrap collection programs for composting or anaerobic digestion. It was also discussed maybe we should be looking at new types or new systems, new approaches, and that includes both unit-based pricing and extended producer responsibility. Now, unit-based pricing is basically a way of treating trash like utility. Now, if you're a homeowner, I doubt you want to pay for your neighbor's water bill, especially if they have a large garden. Would you pay your neighbor's utility bill or energy bill, especially in the summer when they have their AC on? Probably not. And that's because we want to only pay for what we use. And like that, unit-based pricing is paying for only what trash you generate. So you're not paying for your neighbor. Through taxes is usually what happens. You pay for everybody, and there's no incentive to reduce. And so unit-based pricing, also known as pay-as-you-throw, is a system that creates equality and also provides an incentive for people to think about waste reduction, reuse, recycle better, and composting. Now, extended producer responsibility is another systems approach that the state is looking at. You may be familiar with it already. We have a number of EPR programs now. Those EPR programs are for mercury thermostats, though that tends to be mostly contractors. But you might be familiar with the electronics recycling program. That is free for residents and no cost to municipalities because it's an EPR program. The same with paint and mattresses, and last year gas cylinders passed, and basically what it does is it's a type of product stewardship where a law is passed and it requires manufacturers of that good to take responsibility for the end of life of that product. So paint is a great example. Paint Care is a nonprofit organization. They represent the paint and coatings associations and manufacturers, and they created a program to make it easy for us to bring our paint to the transfer station or to a local hardware store or a paint store, and all that material is collected and recycled at no cost to us. It's a great program. So the state is looking at other programs to benefit municipalities. And this past year, tire EPR was put forth and passed, though I don't think it was signed yet by the governor, but it is also new EPR program. So the gas cylinder program is starting up, and then soon tires will be implemented. And then we have a lot of local initiatives. Because municipalities were engaged in this process, as well as continue to read and think about how can they do better, we have a number of initiatives. We have a lot of towns that are collecting glass separately. We have communities that are part of the Zero Waste Schools Coalition that are looking at school waste, that are looking at cafeteria waste, and how can they reduce it or collect it for composting or recycling. We also, the department has a Sustainable Materials Management Grant, and this grant is specifically for a collection program where they're looking at trash and they're also looking at food scraps at the same time. It's called co-collection. And are you part of that program, Branford? Okay, I don't think you are either. But you could be in the next round. You know, I think they're going to be opening up the grant again. I'm gonna keep going. So the co-collection program is very innovative. It's very different. Not a lot of states are doing it. Connecticut is really testing the model. And what it is basically they have a bag. The bags are colored. And so an orange bag represents trash, and a green bag represents food scraps. And they put the bags together in one trash bin. And then at a facility, they separate them. The trash goes to the waste to energy or the landfill, and then the food scraps go to composting or AD. Again, we're looking at new solutions to try to deal with the waste crisis. And businesses, we have a lot more businesses doing really innovative things. And one includes Bright Feeds. They make animal feed from food scraps. So it's not just like a piggery that's feeding animals food scraps, but they actually manufacture animal feed for chickens, cows, and swine, I think. And then Stop and Shop, another example of something innovative. They're beginning to use this app called Flash Food app, where when food is basically reduced in price because it's going to expire in like 5 days, they put it on the app and you can purchase it directly. Very interesting. Again, different solutions, trying to be innovative and trying to reduce waste. And on a personal level, we really just need to reflect on creating new habits. Sadly, we have a lot of food waste that is thrown away every year. And this is not only at our farms and our grocery stores, but a lot of it, unfortunately, is wasted in our homes. And so there are things that we can do to try to prevent this. One is create a shopping list before you go shopping. Believe it or not, when you create a shopping list because you know what you're going to make that week or what you're going to eat that week, will actually reduce the amount of food that goes wasted. Create a menu and then shop. Meal and grocery planning apps can also help. If you are not familiar with cooking, there are a lot of apps that can help you figure out how to cook things that are left in your refrigerator. Encourage you to eat leftovers. Now, I myself don't do this, but you could place older foods up front and newer foods in the back, so you're constantly like rotating your own personal stock in your refrigerator. You could label things. I don't label things in the fridge that well, but I do label in the freezer, because if you don't label it, you don't know what it is later on. And freezing foods is a great way of preserving them. If you have too much of something and you know you're not going to eat it, don't put it in the fridge. Put it in the freezer, but make sure you label it first. And then if it does go wasted, participate in a local program or perhaps compost in your own backyard. There's also ways of trying to think about waste reduction and reuse through purchasing. So you can purchase items that have less packaging. Sometimes we personally hate particular types of packaging, so you could try to avoid it. You could buy durable items that can be repaired. Consider replacing single-use items by buying or using reusable mugs. I see some people have water bottles tonight that are reusable and refillable. That is great. You can also do other things in your kitchen. We most likely use reusable utensils and cups and things in our own homes. But if you're doing takeout, maybe tell them you don't need that plastic silverware because you're going to bring it home anyway. Think about how to reduce the amount of single-use items or perhaps replace them. And then if you are thinking about donation is a great way of ensuring that products that you have now that you can no longer need continue a life is great. However, think about donating responsibly. If somebody is looking for used musical instruments, you're not going to give them a bandsaw because it's a tool. However, if somebody is collecting old tools or old garden seeds or clothing, you're not going to give them medical equipment. And so think about the nonprofit that is seeking a donation and make sure you understand what kind of materials they're looking for, and then try to match the materials that you have to give them. A lot of the things that you have now that you may not need anymore could be used, and that does include sports equipment, medical equipment, books, musical instruments, etc. And then, while you're here tonight, a really good practice is to try to better understand how to recycle right. And I'm not here to make you feel guilty. The things I'm about to share is to just help you understand how we can improve and how we can get better. RecycleCT.com is an excellent webpage that has a lot of resources. It has the materials that are on the table that some of you gathered earlier, and you can also get them online. You can actually download and print them yourself. So if you're part of a faith community or perhaps a condo association, you can print them for all your neighbors. The RecycleCT webpage also has a search tool. We refer to it as the RecycleCT Wizard. And you could actually put a particular type of item in there and find out whether or not it goes in your recycling bin or not. You can also download the app version. So, what is recycling? We should start at the beginning. So you'll see in the right-hand side of the screen is a man with a cart. And I understand Branford now has a nice big cart, so this definitely applies to where you're headed. We often think about, okay, it goes in the bin and we've done. we've recycled. Well, that's the beginning. And we as homeowners or residents or consumers, we definitely are at a very important place in the system. We're at the very beginning. But it's only the beginning. Because once that material is collected, it has to go somewhere. It's picked up and it goes to a materials recovery facility, which we often call a MRF. And at the MRF, that material is separated mechanically and manually. What happens is that material, that picture there, a truck empties onto the floor of this facility, and then another vehicle pushes it onto a conveyor belt, and it goes up on the conveyor belt where people manually pick out some of the debris, and then it continues on its way where you have magnets and blowers and other types of equipment that separate the materials. And they separate the materials so that they can bale it. And a bale is often a cube, if you will. Could be 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. It could also be 2 by 2 by 3 or 4 by 4 by 4. It depends on what the end market wants it to be. The end market is the buyer. They buy the materials, and they have specifications that our MRFs have to meet. They have to meet the size requirements, and they also have to meet how much contamination is or is not in that bale. Too much contamination, the value of that material goes down, and it may cost them money to give it away, or they may not even accept it. So we need to make sure that they can meet that specification. And then what happens is they sell that item, and the end market makes it into a new product. In this example, it was natural high-density polyethylene, a very busy chemically name, which is basically like a milk jug. And they made it into beads. And so the product was beads, plastic beads. But that's not where it ends. They then sell their product to another company that makes it into another milk jug. But that's not where the cycle ends. One more step, and that is that it's used for a product and we purchase it again. By buying things that were recycled, we are completing the cycle. So we collect it, it's brought to a facility, it's processed and sorted and separated, it's sold to an end market, it's made into a new product, and then we buy it again. So coming into Connecticut, in 2015, we did a waste characterization. We wanted to understand what kind of materials are still in our waste stream. At the same time, we did a characterization of what is in our single stream recycling. Single stream recycling hit us basically by storm or surprise back in about 2010. And so we wanted to have an understanding of what people were putting in that bin. And this is what is being put in the bin. You'll see it's over 50% fiber or paper, right? That's our cardboard and our newspaper and our magazines. And then you have a small amount of aseptic cartons. That's like milk cartons and juice boxes. And then you have plastic bottles, glass bottles, aluminum cans, steel cans, and then, of course, that big red piece of the pie, contaminants. Contaminants are things we don't want. Those are things that muddies the water. Those are the things that our facilities have to try to pull out of the system in order to meet that specification and sell their product. So again, this was done in 2015. It was 2 years before we started the Recycle CT or What's In, What's Out campaign. So my hope is that when we do another characterization, we're going to see that pie, that piece of pie shrink, because I know we're all doing so much better. And then after tonight, we're going to do even better. I also wanted to sort of touch upon markets. Now, a lot of times in the past, we might see different articles, especially we're so close to New York, and the New York Times runs a number of articles of what's truly happening to our recyclables. It's going into the oceans. It's going into a landfill. Well, that might be for some states, but that is not for Connecticut. Connecticut, our materials are processed and are marketed and made into new products. though markets have fluctuated. And what we're finding is that before COVID, we had something called China's national sword policy. So we have to think back pre-COVID. And what that was is basically China created a policy where a lot of things from the US, not just Connecticut, but the US, was heavily contaminated, even more than our little 18.2% contamination pipe. And they started rejecting the loads. And they said, we don't want your stuff anymore. And first they said, we don't want your mixed plastics. We don't want your containers. And then eventually they said, no containers. We only want your paper and cardboard. Eventually they said, we don't even want your mixed paper. We only want your cardboard. And you could not have more than 5% contamination in it. It made it very difficult for our facilities to meet those specifications. And then COVID hit. And COVID, strangely enough, was lovely for recycling markets because all of a sudden domestically, we were desperate for toilet paper and other paper products. And with the supply chains shut down for a bit, we found that manufacturers started upping their game and started making more. And their raw materials came from our recyclables. It also, of course, was at a time that we were purchasing everything online, and we had a plethora of cardboard boxes that were entering the recycling stream, and also a need for more cardboard boxes. So markets were great during COVID. Now we're sort of in a sort of post-COVID, supply-demand issues, inflation, question mark? And what we're finding is that there's no consistency towards current market changes. So I'm going to bore you a little bit. And I'm really going to bore you because I want you to understand that these materials are bought and sold, that these materials are commodities. People don't collect them just so they can put them in the ocean. They make money off of it. And so these have been updated recently. I am part of a regional recycling markets group for the Northeast, and OCC is old corrugated cardboard, and it's currently at $47.50 a ton, and that is up $5 from last month. RMP is residential mixed paper. That's all the other paper we might generate that's not cardboard, and that is $12.50 a ton, which is also up. It's also up a lot from March. I was looking at March quantities too. So it tells us that prices go up, but they also come down. But then they'll go up again, and they'll probably go down again. So when you see articles that, talk about that recyclables aren't worth anything, they're always going to be fluctuating. And then we have a lot of plastics. A lot of people are concerned about plastics. From the recycling perspective, we're only interested in containers. There may be a lot of plastics out in the world, but from a recycling standpoint, we're only interested in containers. And so we have milk jugs. Prices are pretty good. Well, actually, I guess they're flat. They didn't move up at all from last month. Colored HDPE or detergent jugs went up a little bit. Water bottles are the same as last month, a little flat. And it looks like polypropylene or berry containers and yogurt tubs are about the same as last month. And then you can see how they're used. They're used in packaging and other containers. Something that might be impacting the markets is Connecticut passed a law requiring recycled content standards. Now, what the heck does that mean? That means that plastic containers need to have a certain percentage of plastic materials that went through a recycling program and are now in our new plastic container. It's supposed to help drive and support markets. I don't know the details about the legislation, and I don't think the governor's signed it yet, but it's most likely going to be. And so that'll be really interesting. Connecticut's not the only state that has such a law, but hopefully it will stabilize plastic container markets. And then just metals. Aluminum is about the same, and sadly, steel cans is a little down. So again, I'm boring you with this to help you understand that they're commodities and that they have value. So how do we recycle? we purchase things in many different ways. And likely, and just as similar, we dispose of things in many ways. We have our trash can and our recycling bin. We have yard debris. We have food scraps. We have bulky waste. We have textiles and clothing. We have paint. We have electronics. And we have plastic film and plastic bags. And of course, Oscar, just because Oscar makes it fun. And so the reason I'm sharing this is that we have lots of different types of recycling programs. So it's important to remember not whether or not I'm just going to put this all in my recycling bin, but the question you should be asking is it acceptable in this program? So think about where is it accepted, and then from there figure out, does it go in that bin? I also just wanted to cover the bottle bill a little bit. The bottle bill's changed a lot in the last couple of years, and so I just wanted to give you a quick update. If you're not aware, Connecticut was one of the early adopters for a bottle bill. It passed in '78, implemented in 1980. Its intention was really about litter. And in 2009, water bottles were added. And then in 2021, a number of new items were added. So initially, the bottle bill was all about carbonated beverages, so beer and soda. And then we added regular water. And then in 2021, hard seltzer, hard cider, plant water, juice drink, tea, coffee, kombucha, plant-infused drink, sports drink, or energy drink were all added and effective the January 1st of this year. So all of those materials are now part of the bottle bill. So if you saw your grocery bill go up a little bit, besides the cost of eggs, it's possible that it's because you're buying containers that now have a deposit on it that didn't before. The other thing to be aware of is we have given an exemption to some of the companies where they may be charging you 5 cents, but that 5-cent thing is not quite on the container yet. But the reverse vending machines, where you put your bottle in and get out a piece of paper and then bring it back into the store, they will read it that you paid that nickel, even if it doesn't have a thing on it yet. Most companies should all now have the label on it that it's part of the Connecticut Bottle Bill Program, but if you had purchased it in the first quarter of this year, it might not have that mark. So just be aware, it'll still go through the program, it just may not have the mark. And then, January of next year, it's going up to 10 cents. So all these items listed here will then have a 10-cent deposit. And then something different, but similar, is the miniature liquor bottle fee. This is not a deposit. It's not a deposit. You don't get it back. However, if you buy miniature liquor bottles, you were charged an additional 5-cent fee. And that fee is charged by the Wholesale Retailers Association, who then calculates how many nickels were paid for in your town, and then they tabulate it and then give a check back to the town. I'm from New Haven. Our checks are pretty big. Some towns, I think it's Sharon maybe, I think they got like $13. Branford's probably somewhere in between. But basically, every 6 months, a check is given to the town, and the intention is to be used for projects related to recycling, solid waste management, et cetera. So you're lucky that Tyler is here. You could ask him later how the money is being used. And if he's not getting those checks, then you should talk to your town to figure out how he can get that money to do good programming. So I finally get to why you're really here is, are we recycling right? First, quiz of the night. Did you know that recycling is mandatory in Connecticut? Do you think that the law was passed in 1975, 1989, or 2012. So I can't quiz the folks at home, but I can give the quiz to folks in the room. A show of hands, do you think the law was passed in 75, 89, or 2012? So the law was passed in 1989. Connecticut was one of the first states to mandate recycling. So really fascinating in that the way that the Connecticut law reads is everyone must recycle. And so it requires everyone. A lot of people are like, wow, California now requires businesses to recycle. Well, Connecticut has required it since 1989. And it's a little bit of a trick question because in 2012, the law was added to, and additional mandatory materials were added to the list. And so these are all the materials that are mandated for recycling in Connecticut. Now, if you don't generate it, you don't have to recycle it. I don't personally generate a lot of motor oil, but if I did, I would be required to recycle it. And in the blue band are all the materials that go in our blue bin, or our blue cart, or our recycling cart. And nothing has changed really since 2012. You can see that it's glass and metal beverage containers and food containers. It's plastic containers, box board, which is like cereal boxes, newspaper, magazines, white and colored office paper or junk mail, and corrugated cardboard. And that's pretty much it. So why is recycling so confusing? That's a great question. I got some responses for you. First, a busy slide. This busy slide is from the USDA. It basically is a graph to show us all the different new products on our retail shelves every year. And you can see it's over 20,000. We have 20,000 new products on our retail shelves every year. Do you think that those brand owners or who are making those products are having a conversation with me about their packaging to say, Cheryl, is this in or out? Do you think they're having those conversations with our MRF operators? No. There's a bit of a disconnect. I think we're improving. We've been improving probably over the last 5 years, but there's still a huge disconnect between new products and its packaging and what can be actually managed and handled in a MRF. And so that is problem number one. Another problem is the recycling arrows. Stop using them as a guide. I know those of us of a certain age may be used to the arrows, but I ask that you stop using them as a guide. Now, originally in the 90s, we did use them because there were very few types of plastic that were used for anything. But now everything is made out of plastic, and it makes it very confusing. So arrows and numbers do not tell you if it's in or out. It just tells you what kind of plastic it is. That's all it does. It doesn't tell you if it's in or out. It doesn't tell you if it's accepted in the program or not. The best thing to do is to say, is it a plastic container? Is it a plastic jug? Is it a plastic bottle? Is it a plastic jar? Is it a plastic tub? Is it a berry container or a clamshell? And if it's not, it's probably out. So to try to make it easier, back in 2017, the department, in partnership with our MRF operators and Recycle CT, went through every single type of product and packaging we could think of, and we asked the questions, is this detrimental to your system? Is this detrimental to your staff? Is this detrimental to your equipment? Or is this detrimental to the value of your commodities? And we ended up coming out with one list. Before that, all the different towns would have completely different guidelines, even if they were sending it to the same exact facility. It was sort of like a game of telephone. Nobody really understood what the other person was saying and had a different opinion about what they heard. And so Connecticut now has one list across the state. We all have the same program. I live in New Haven. What's in or what's out is the same for me as it is for the town of Branford, as it is for the town of Manchester, as it is for the town of Litchfield. We all have the same list that we're using. And the reason that we went through this process is because a lot of our MRF operators were taking stuff because they wanted to help, but they didn't really want it. And so we learned that there was a lot of materials that were detrimental and unsafe to their staff. There was stuff that was unsafe for their equipment, and then ultimately would reduce the value of the commodities that they're trying to sell. And that's how we came up with a list. And as I mentioned before, the Recycle CT Wizard and its app is a great tool. It has the what's in and what's out. And then when it might be something a little outside, like electronics recycling or household hazardous waste, it encourages you to reach out to your recycling coordinator. This app is also available for anybody's web page. So we have this search tool on municipal web pages. It could be on churches, nonprofits. We have a couple of waste haulers and also facility operators that use the same widget, which makes it all very cohesive. And here's the app. The app is great because it's also in many, many different languages. And as I mentioned before, we have a lot of materials that you can download and print. And so again, when we're looking at the waste characterization, and we have over 50% paper and all these other materials, and we have this huge slice that is contamination, we need to think about how can we reduce the amount of contamination that we are sending to our facilities. These are the top contaminants that were found in our waste characterization: plastic bags and bag material, shredded paper, bottle caps, and tanglers. And tanglers are things like wire, garden hoses, chains, and even textiles can tangle up the equipment. And I'm here to be the bad person saying, I'm going to make you feel bad, but I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. All pizza boxes are in. It doesn't matter if there's grease. We just ask no crust, no food, no liner. So it doesn't matter if it's a little grease or a lot of grease, just no crust, no food. Only plastic containers, and no paper cups or paper plates or napkins, no toys, no pots and pans, no hangers. Hangers are a huge tangler, and no scrap metal. And then I mentioned that bags and bagged material are a problem. Can you tell from this pile which bags are the trash and which bags are the nice, clean recyclables? Well, our MRF operators can't either. So I think I mentioned that all of our recyclables go on the floor. A machine pushes, a piece of equipment pushes it onto the conveyor belt, and the first line of defense are people. And they go through and they pick out things. Well, it's moving at a pretty good clip. They don't have time to open the bag and go, ew, diapers, or, oh, beautiful recyclables. Anything in a bag is going to get trashed. So please don't bag your materials. At all. And then this is what happens to those bags. I'm going to step away for a moment. So you can see this is a conveyor. That is a bunch of knives. It's a bunch of circular, I don't know how to describe them, but they're knives, and they get tangled. And you can see they're completely covered with plastic. And then you see that yellow blob in the bottom? That's a man. That's a man who had to jump in and manually cut everything. All of our facilities have this problem. All facilities shut down 3 times a day and spend 15 minutes to 30 minutes cutting plastic bags and film off of the machinery. Here's another view. It's a huge problem. We have to stop putting plastic bags in there. And if you've done it before, don't feel guilty, just now you know to do better. And then while I was standing where the yellow-shirted man, this is all the stuff he had cut out in like 15 minutes. Tons and tons of stuff. And it causes problems. The machine can't work as properly when it's tangled up. And of course, it's a concern for workers. So we have to think about worker safety. Did I mention don't pack your recyclables? So you've seen this picture before. Now you have an understanding of why our role is so important. We are at the front line. We're at the front line because we put everything in our bin, and when it's cleaner and less contamination, it's easier for them to process it. It's easier for them to meet that specification and sell that material so it can be made into a new product that we can buy. And this is glass. This is Murph glass. And these are all the different things that are in it. Pens, pencils, lip balm, tampon applicators, batteries, all the small things. Small things don't belong in the recycling bin. It's about containers and paper. Because all these small things contaminate the glass. This is why a number of municipalities are starting to collect glass separately. And then there's a lot of other things that our MRF operators say, please, please, please keep out of the recycling bin. Believe it or not, people put in syringes, they put in ammunition, they put in utensils, and I'm not just talking plastic, I'm talking metal utensils are extremely dangerous. Syringes, batteries, diapers, gross. So again, don't think about, is this recyclable? Think about whether or not it's acceptable in the program. And now it's time for your quiz. You ready? I know people at home have it easy. All right. Hopefully the camera will catch up with me. Can you folks still hear me? Okay. So I have common materials, and I'm going to ask you if it's in or out. And I'm going to start easy. Did I mention I was from New Haven? A pizza box, is it in or out? In. Does it matter how much grease? Yes. No. It does not matter how much grease. What matters is no food. You got to eat all those anchovies. And no paper, no liner. All right. I'll be easy with you guys. This is an egg carton. It's made out of styrofoam. In or out? It is out, correct. Ding, 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 gold star. That goes in regular trash? Trash. Here, I'll put it on the other side. Trash. Bad. Milk carton. In. This is also an egg carton, but it's made out of fiberboard or paper. In. Garden hose. Out? What do you mean? This is plastic. It's a tangler. It's out. All right, easy. Pasta box. In. This is like a juice box, but it was broth. In or out? In, correct. All right, I'm going to give you guys a hard one. You ready for hard? So when we went through the universal list with MRF operators, I actually had never heard the term for this type of container. So this was a new one for me. So this is like when you get the biscuits or you get the Pringles. This is called a spiral wound container. Crazy. In or out? Correct. It is out. I had no idea that MRF operators really, really hate these. And it's because they're not all consistent, but they all have metal and plastic, and they can tangle because of the way that they're structured. And so all of these are out. It includes things like nuts and dried fruit. Sadly, all of these are out, including oatmeal. Now, a lot of people ask me about this type of oatmeal where it's cardboard on the bottom, cardboard, no metal in the inside, and it's only got a plastic rim. If you're an uber recycler, you can take off the plastic and put it in with the paper, but everything else is out, out, out. Sad, I know.
So they go in regular
Trash.
trash.
I know. It was a shocker for me, too. Oh, we got to throw it over here. All right. All right, I'll give you another. Well, maybe this is easy or hard. Amazon envelope. This is plastic bubble wrap through and through. In or out? Is it a container? It is out. However, are you familiar with the plastic film recycling program? A lot of our retail stores take plastic bags at the front of the store. This is accepted in that same program called the WRAP program. So you can put it in with your plastic bags. On that same note, bubble wrap, in or out? Out. But this can also go with plastic film and with your plastic bags at a grocery store. Black plastic takeout container. Out. Black plastic is out. So sadly, all plastic containers are in, but we have a few exceptions. One of them is styrofoam, and the other is sadly black plastic containers. And that's because the optic scanners cannot read the black container. And for styrofoam, it's because it's so lightweight, there's no true markets for it, so it's just not as valuable. Neither of them are mandatory materials, and so our MRF operators have asked that they not be accepted. And so we have to honor that, and they are out. They get, say it again?
If they go in regular trash, do they get burnt, or do they go in a landfill? Or what?
So the question is what happens to our trash? Because if we're putting them in our trash, it depends on the town. But before Mira closed, most of our materials were all going to a waste-to-energy facility, whether it be Hartford or Bridgeport or elsewhere. And now that a third of our trash is going into landfill, it probably depends on how your town is contracted. So New Haven, for instance, I think our materials are going to Bridgeport and being incinerated. I'm not sure about Branford.
Ours are most likely waste to energy as well, incineration.
So the answer is that Branford's trash is also being incinerated, most likely Bridgeport. Okay. So I'm going to give you an easy one. This is a mayonnaise container. It is plastic, in or out? It is correct. It is in. It's accepted in the program. Okay. I'll do a few more hard ones. Ice cream carton.
Out.
You're correct.
I read it.
That's good that you read it. This one's a hard one. I myself didn't understand it because I was like, it makes no sense. But I talked to the Carton Council. Believe it or not, every type of packaging has its own association. And the Carton Council said it has to do with the type of paper and its wet strength. Don't ask me what that means, but what it means is that it's got some type of a makeup so that it has wet strength to sit in the freezer and deal with our ice cream, and because of that, it's just not accepted in the program. I'm sorry. We've got to start eating ice cream in plastic containers or eat ice cream cones. Now's the season for iced coffee and iced tea or bubble tea, in or out. So the cup is in, but the lid and the straw are out. All right, one more tough one. You ready? Think about glass. I'm giving you clues. Think about glass when I pose this question. So I'm going to set up a number of containers. It'll be hard for people at home, but this is a little spice jar. This is a little mini bottle of Chardonnay. This is a vitamin, a prescription container, more vitamins, little mini liquor bottles. So the question is, are any of these in or are any of them out?
Well, the little liquor bottles and the Chardonnay can go back to the liquor store for their deposit, can't they?
They are not deposits. So mini liquor containers are not in the bottle bill program. There's just a fee. So there's nothing that prevents you from, sadly, littering them, but they are not accepted in the program. So do you remember the glass and all that contamination? It was so contaminated because of the size of small things. So in this case, size matters. So this is just for illustration, but all of these things should easily go into the trash, sadly. But if you were an Uber recycler, think about the size of a credit card or a 2x2-inch square. What happens when you have a MRF operation, right? It gets dumped on the floor, it gets put on a conveyor belt, people manually pick out some stuff, it goes through optic scanners and blowers and magnets and everything else, and then the last conveyor belt puts everything in the glass. Now the glass has a huge grate, and that grate has a 2x2-inch holes. Lots of little holes. Anything that can fit through there is going to contaminate glass. Anything that fits through there will contaminate the glass. This is the only thing that doesn't fit through. So if it's too confusing and you don't feel like making a 2-inch by 2-inch grid, I would throw all small containers in the trash. Because sadly, it contaminates our materials. So I made a mess up here, so I'm going to open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions? So the question is what about rolls for paper towels and toilet paper, like this? This is accepted. This is great fiber paper, so that is in. Great question. Anybody else?
Did you say that with things like the oatmeal container, if you cut off the plastic, that part of the corrugated cardboard would be acceptable?
I did. And so the only reason the oatmeal container is different than the others is all of these have a silvery inside. If they have a silvery inside, they just have to go in the trash, sadly. But this one doesn't have any silver lining. It also doesn't have a metal bottom. If it had a metal bottom, it would be a problem too. But this one literally is just paper except for this little plastic lid or rim. And so I must admit I ripped them out and then do it that way. But if it's too much effort, I'd rather you put it in the trash than contaminate the recycling. Any other questions?
How about tops for yogurt, like big yogurt containers? How about the plastic?
She's asking about tops for yogurt containers. Let me see if well, this is probably very similar. So this is a lid, and lids are acceptable. What isn't acceptable is bottle caps when they're loose. So if I had this on, well, I guess that's a bad example because that's not accepted. So I have a milk container, and if I left the lid on it, the little bottle cap on it, that's okay. But if the bottle cap is loose, that's bad. Because now what's going to happen? It's going to contaminate the glass.
And the metal bottle caps would also be not accepted.
So the question is about the metal bottle caps. Metal bottle caps are also out. Beer caps, some wine bottle comes with metal. If you have a glass jar and you have like an actual large lid that's metal, a large metal lid is fine, like pickles or I can't think of what else, but lids are fine. Believe it or not, I did a lot of research on the difference between bottle caps and lids. The terms are often used interchangeably, but lids are larger and caps are smaller. Who knew? Any questions? More questions? Say it again. Somebody's asking about shredded office paper. So sadly, shredded paper is all out. And this, while facilities used to accept it, they really accept it as a courtesy for the town, but they didn't really want it. However, that doesn't mean it's not recyclable. It just means it should be collected in a different program. So a lot of towns are now offering shredding events. And then usually when you contract for that shredding event, you make sure that they accept pre-shredded paper. And that's because people want to bring shredded paper from home because a lot of people have personal shredders now. And I can tell you when we started creating the list, I toured all the facilities and I was amazed at the air quality. So while little pieces of paper can contaminate their plastic bales, the other thing that happens is because people were putting them in plastic bags, they would pop and they'd be like confetti. And the quality of the air at a facility was awful because of the shredded paper. And so, again, facilities were like, yeah, we'll take it. And I'm like, yeah, but do you want it? Is it detrimental to your staff? Is it detrimental to your equipment? And does it reduce the value of their commodities? They're like, well, yeah, we don't want it. And I'm like, well, then it should not be accepted. And so hopefully the town of Branford, if they don't already have shredding events, will now consider it. Wink, wink, Tyler.
So we're not to bring shredded material to the transfer station where the newspapers go?
Will you ask the question before you answer it in the mic?
Right. So I think this is on. So the question was if you should bring shredded paper to the transfer station and put it where we collect the other paper. So starting on July 3rd, we're actually even the transfer station is switching over to single stream. So we're going to collect all the paper, cardboard, and plastic together. So based on the rules within Connecticut and the guidelines within Connecticut, technically shredded paper would go in the trash, unless we did some other form of collection that we would then be able to utilize for paper shredding events.
Any other question? Oh.
I have two actually. How about batteries, like from flashlights and things like that, remotes? Where would I put those?
Might be better for you to directly describe it. Some of them can be recycled, some can't.
So
if you
the
have-
question is about
Sorry.
batteries. No, that's
Sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
So regular alkaline batteries, regular household alkaline batteries can go in the regular trash. However, lithium batteries cannot go in the trash and should be brought to your household hazardous waste event. And then rechargeable batteries, it's very complicated.
Yeah.
Rechargeable batteries could be brought to a household hazardous waste event, but you might also find like Best Buy or other retailers that sell electronics might take them back. And a lot of times, your electronics recycler may also take your rechargeable batteries and your lithium batteries with their products, but it depends on your contract.
Which I believe they do.
Okay.
I believe at our transfer station you can bring batteries. We have a section in our electrics equipment collection shed that you can
Okay.
put batteries into. And one thing I just wanted to point out is that we do participate in Haz Waste Central events. They actually happen in New Haven on Saturdays from 9 to 12. They've already started, from what I understand, and they run for about 4 months out of the year, more so during the summer months.
That's right. They end sometime in October, I think.
Right.
I don't know whether it matters if they're alkaline and lithium, but Home Depot also has a place where you can bring batteries and light bulbs.
That's great. So she's sharing that Home Depot is a good resource too, and will accept batteries and fluorescent light bulbs. Great.
How about aerosol cans, like empty whipped cream cans, things like that?
So the question is what about aerosol cans? Great question. So there are two different categories. There's food grade, and then there's non-food grade. If it's a food grade, like the whipped cream, Cheese Whiz, I can't think of what else is aerosol, those are accepted in the program. So you can put it right in your mixed recycling bin. However, if it's shaving cream or some like WD-40, something like that, you don't want to put that in your recycling bin. And it has to do with the fact that the propellants are different. I learned this too when we created the list. Propellants are different for food grade versus other chemicals.
So those would go to hazardous waste then?
WD-40 would go to hazardous waste, but like shaving cream would just go in the trash can. You guys have great questions.
Yeah, a lot of very good questions.
Anything else?
You're also asking the questions for the people at home that can't ask the questions. So if you have anything at all, feel free.
And the other thing to remember is that Recycle CT, you could go to the webpage, and if the item is not in your search tool, you could shoot an email to Recycle CT and they'll answer your question, or you could go to their Facebook page and ask a question, and your questions will be answered there.
And I just wanted to mention one thing. We do have on our town website, actually, the Recycle Wizard from Recycle Right. So for those watching and those here, you could go to our town website. I believe it's directly on the solid waste and recycling page. You can go in and type anything you can think of, and it should be able to tell us if it can be recycled in the program or not.
All right. Looks like we're done.
All right. Well, I wanted to thank everyone for coming. Thank you to those watching at home. Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Henry, for setting this up on TV. We appreciate it, everyone, and we look forward to recycling right.
All right. Thank you. Yay.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.